Welcome to the garden I've dreamed of, where wisdom gathers, where grandmothers listen, and their voices collective weave hope for generations. Can I tell you my favorite place? It's where stories are told through the skill of our wonderful Sandra Lobb. Can you hear the echoes of their experiences resonating with yours? I invite you to explore them. What a joyous time it has been for me. What a joyful gift we can bring to each other and to the mothers and the children yet to come on our precious home, here on our dear Mother Earth.
I'm so honored to be here with Dr. Reverend Julianne Robertson. She is committed to fostering unity and healing within communities. She's an interfaith minister, peace activist, spiritual counselor, and corporate attorney based in Washington, D.C. Her work emphasizes compassion, peace, truth, unconditional love, personal empowerment, justice, mutual acceptance, and generosity of spirit. Wow, that's quite something for an attorney, especially a corporate attorney. She is also the mother of 4 children. In her professional career, Dr. Robertson has provided counsel to private clients, government agencies, and political leaders. Thank you for your service for that. She serves as associate pastor at Allen Chapel AME Church in Washington, D.C., and has been involved with organizations such as the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, advocating for the preservation of historic African American burial sites. Thank you for that service as well. Dr. Julie, so nice to meet you. Can you please tell us more about what you'll be offering us on December 18th as part of the Tending Our Roots series?
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited about our upcoming interview on the 18th. As you mentioned, my work includes many facets of spirituality, which are aimed at healing and reconciliation. We look forward to a world where we do not inflict emotional or psychological or physical violence on one another, where we find ways to collaborate, to create better economic systems, better systems of governance, to give rise to civilizations in the future, which create beauty, beautiful textiles, literature, art, educational institutions, universities that leave a legacy of high attainment of all kinds. I'm sure that many of us are filled with some trepidation about the upcoming presidential term and what it means for the world. Every dark cloud has a silver lining, and we understand that difficult times may create suffering, but there is always the possibility and the likelihood that Western civilizations, Eastern civilizations, and countries in the Southern Hemisphere will find common ground and develop new ways of trade, economics, and governance, and collaboration. So that's my dream, and that's what I want to talk about on the 18th.
That's a beautiful dream. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Again, thank you for your service at our nation's capital, and we look forward to hearing more from you on December 18th.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. My name is Mayana Kingery. Welcome to Tending Our Roots Day 7 with the Global Grandmothers Council Network. Now, these 10 days with voices of wisdom from our grandmothers has been designed to really bless our lives and for each of us to go deep into our own roots. And today we're going to go deep into the roots of our sacred activism with Dr. Julie. Now, GGCN, that's our acronym for Global Grandmothers Council Network, is a nonprofit movement where we are raising the voices of grandmothers and preserving their stories and their wisdom. We envision a place where the world listens to and heeds our wisdom. So now is the time, and we are the ones. Let's rise together and come together and gather all our stories and life experiences in Grandmother's Garden. That's the private web platform we've created for this purpose. So be sure to go to globalgrandmotherscouncil.org, click join to enter the garden. Inside, we have many ways to bring your potential and your collective wisdom, whether you post about life and family, your passions and activities, or join a council and lead as part of this global movement. It's a grand movement, and you will be welcomed and nurtured in Grandmother's Garden. So, Dr. Julie, the world is changing in ways that require a new analysis of history and scriptural prophecy. These changes open an opportunity for greater unity, cooperation, and unconditional love. So welcome, Dr. Julie, to Global
Thank you
Grandmothers
so
Council
very much for
Network.
having.
Oh, it's
Thank you.
so my honor to bring you on. Thank you for
The
coming.
honor is mine. It really is. Thank you, for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to say first and foremost that our organization, Global Grandmothers Network, is serving an important need in the world right now. As women who are of a certain age, we wind up being in a position of being able to share our experience and our knowledge and our wisdom. At this time in human history, we are at a point of evolution. I am a student of religion as well as a minister, and I feel that our political reality right now in the United States and around the world is at a turning point. The older religions like Zoroastrianism, the Hebrew tradition, the Hindu tradition, Buddhism, Jainism, Taoism, all of these traditions have a prediction of the end times. Hinduism in particular talks about the Kali Yuga, a period of time where a destroyer shows up and begins to deconstruct the elements of existing societies. Well, based on my analysis of history, and I was a political science graduate before I was a lawyer or a minister, the destroyer has shown up, and we know who it is and how they are likely to take away the personal freedoms and distort the message of democracy. One of the things that we are called on to do right now, and we look to the former wisdom of Krishna and Vishnu and even forward, because Islam is after Christianity. So we look at all of these prophecies, all of this wisdom as a composite, because God shows up in different places around the world at different times. And if we look at the aggregate of all of that wisdom, we understand that we are one people in the world. And so I'm on Team Jesus at this time, and I understand that he showed up in the world to teach us how to love one another. And the way that that love shows up is we work to heal the sick. We saw him restore sight to the blind. He made the lame walk. We even have scripture that shows that all he had to do was say the words Talitha cum, which means little girl, get up. And she arose from the dead right there. So he was a way shower who taught us how to resist unjust, unethical use of power by allowing God to come into our beingness and to use the power of God as a means to transform reality for ourselves and for others, not just as individuals, but around the world. And so the power of unconditional love releases us from the yokes of power. We've seen a prior destroyer, Adolf Hitler, who took the German people from a place of economic productivity. And we had Martin Luther, who was German, who transformed the world of religion and began the Protestant aspect of Christianity. So we have a people who were productive in their own right, and yet one person who, and Adolf Hitler wasn't even German, he was Austrian. So, it's not necessarily a knock on any one ethnicity, but it is a guidepost as to how people can be led into fear, hatred, aggression, violence, and suffering. We don't have to do that. Our job is to think about what will happen to our children, our children's children, if we don't collectively pray in a kind of love, a kind of collaboration, and we pray in a new behavior where we look at people and we see the divine spark within them. I had an incident a couple of weeks ago where our pastor, I'm going to give a shout out to my pastor, Reverend Dr. Michael E. Bell Sr., who is the senior pastor at Allen Chapel AME Church in Washington, D.C. And he took us on a walk through a emerging or impoverished area of Washington, D.C., where we met people, we shook hands, we gave hugs, and we prayed with people. And we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. I had an experience with one man who I believe was afflicted by an unclean spirit. And I do not believe in fear-based teaching. I believe that when Jesus encountered a man in the same condition as this guy, he spoke life into the man and cast the demon out into a herd of pigs, and they threw themselves over a cliff into the ocean. I didn't have a nearby herd of pigs or an ocean nearby, but what I did do was go into a heightened state of consciousness, held his hand, and I come from a family of empaths. And what I saw my grandmother and my aunt do dozens of times was to absorb the affliction, take it away from the person, and then ask God to take it away from me and put it somewhere else. That's the technique that I have. Anyway, in this particular instance, the man came to me through a crowd of people and said, I need help. All I want is love. That's what he said. And so I held his hand, I had a colleague's hand, and we started to pray. And the prayer comes from the heart space, and the words come from the heart. And I could feel the transmission of love through my heart into the man. I'm not afraid of spirits. I don't fear them. We are supposed to, all of us, not just ministers, not just saints, not just holy people. Our real spiritual attainment is that when we show up, the unclean spirits get afraid and they walk away, because love is the ultimate power. And so while I hear myself praying, and the words stop, and then we come to, and the man is crying, and then I start crying. And I could feel, the affliction lift from him. And there was a moment where it was him, it was me, it was the crowd of people, but God prevailed over anything that wasn't him. So when we teach our children to pray and to believe, knowing that God is always with us, God goes before us, and he surrounds us individually and collectively. When we go into deep meditation and we visualize the entire planet, we understand that there are no two opposite points on the planet that are that far from each other, perhaps no more than 20 hours or so away. And so we understand that if we allow God to come into our beingness and we project his love and his light and his caring and concern, it's important to understand that Jesus did not come to the world to start a religion around himself. He came to the world to help us to rise higher so that we don't kill people, we don't commit genocide, we don't enslave people, we don't hurt children under any circumstance. And we see the divine spark in every human being so that we can never hurt them, because it's also an act of self-harm if we hurt somebody else. We look at this time in history as a turning point where it's important to rebuke those tendencies within the self that cause us to behave in unethical, unjust, or violent ways. And so we release greed and we look to create economic systems where trade partners don't exploit each other, where companies from the Western Hemisphere and Europe don't go into Africa or Australia and steal commodities. I had an honor in 2017 where I was able to go to the Women Economic Forum and speak about corporate ethics and governance. And at that time, it came to me that when we do not pay fair price for commodities that we reap from Africa, what's happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo right now is an atrocity beyond belief, because there are millions of people in camps harvesting diamonds, harvesting cobalt, harvesting coltan and manganese, magnesium, other commodities that are necessary for our electronics and other things that we use in the Western world on an everyday basis. But they have no schools, they don't have clean water, there's insufficient food and no housing whatsoever. And Western governments influence different militias within the Democratic Republic of the Congo to fight one another and create conflict so that a legitimate government cannot be established that serves the people. Government service, ministerial service, medical service, the intention behind them is that people have better lives because we work. Our work is not to be seen or to have power. As a matter of fact, was it Machiavelli who said absolute power corrupts absolutely? So when we rebuke that urge within the self to use power in a way that makes somebody else suffer, we are on the wrong path. And so our job right now is to enlighten leaders all over the country, all over the world, to find the equality, find the divine spark in every human being on the planet, because God created us all. And so I'm not going to create a policy from the White House that puts people in slavery. I'm going to find ways to curtail the current tendency in the United States for police to shoot unarmed Black people, for instance. It's time for politics and high spirituality to be on the same level. And the only people who can effectuate that change are the people, the citizens of the United States. I, spoke recently about the fact that capitalism is an economic system and democracy is a system of governance. But they have been conflated in this country so that if we try to critique capitalism, people think we're being undemocratic, but that's not the case. We can take the sting out of capitalism. Capitalism depends on hierarchies where there are consumers and then there are corporations who kind of are predatory to the consumer. It doesn't have to be that way. Everybody doesn't have to have a new Tesla in their garage. We don't have to have, and I'm also self-convicting here because, I wear a mink coat periodically and I have a nice car and I have had a beautiful 5-bedroom mini mansion. But those are just material things. And the real value of this time in history is we have a chance to change our attitudes and our behavior to create a better, more just and equitable world. Now is the time.
Absolutely. The predatory capitalism is a term that I've heard used. I'm not sure who coined it, but the capitalism that is predatory is destructive, whereas there is a way to exchange goods and services, even in capitalism, that can be healthy and flourishing. And that's kind of what we're trying to start for the grandmothers in our marketplace, in our academy, is that when you purchase goods and services from a grandmother, you pay what it's worth, and she gets that income. It's so important that we honor each individual person and what they can produce and what they can bring forth, and give what it's worth, and not expect,
Right.
Oh, I'm going to just go get the cheapest thing I can get, or, whatever.
Absolutely. I think it's crucial to ascribe proper value to things we purchase, but a human being has higher value. So when we create something for sale, we are putting our heart and soul into it. And so when I sell you a prayer session, for instance, I want you to value it and feel as if you have received fair value from what I exchange with you. So I definitely understand what you mean. What I really critique is the tendency to place value on objects as status symbols, and then try and convince the consumers that, well, you're not really good enough unless you have what I'm selling you. But the truth is that the human soul is what's really crucially, irreplaceably beautiful, irreplaceably precious. And so those things can't be bought. And we don't need a factory to create them because all been created by God. For sure.
Yeah, we have to value our humanity, and that is something we have kind of failed in the Western world, to value each human as living essence, that we aren't things, and even those things that we have are not just things. There is consciousness through everything. God is in all, as all, through all, and he's surely not going to stay out of me or you. That divinity that we each have in our core is what can bring us together and help us find this sacred activism that we need in the world. So all are considered equal and all can stand hand in hand and heart to heart.
I agree with that completely. I look at sacred activists of the past, starting with Mahatma Gandhi, starting with Jesus, who was the ultimate revolutionary. He brought a kind of resistance to the behavior of the Roman Empire and the behaviors that caused people to feel pain, caused people in foreign countries to suffer and have to pay exorbitant taxes so that the Roman emperor and his people would have lavish houses and indoor plumbing and all of the luxuries that existed at that time. The need for personal wealth and the accumulation of personal wealth is a tricky subject, because we want people to have what they want to have, but we shouldn't necessarily create a system that makes it okay for a higher echelon of people to exploit others so that they can have luxuries. That's not necessarily a good thing. So Jesus protested that tendency by allowing individual people and groups of people to feel whole, perfect, and complete in and of themselves as individuals who are connected to a much higher realm. I can speak for myself and say that if I didn't have God, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I've survived more than one near-death experience and had one experience where I actually crossed over and came back. So our ability to connect to Jesus, to Mahatma Gandhi, to Krishna and Vishnu, Muhammad, all of those people who came before us and put everything on the line so that we could continue to live and continue to trust the sacred angels who come to earth periodically to help us. That's what he came to talk about. And so I look at the way Martin Luther King was martyred and speaking for freedom and justice and equity. Why do we kill our thought leaders? That's the question that I have. And what does it mean when people who would otherwise be on the picket line or leading the march are not necessarily silent, but subdued? Perhaps it's because the 501c3 laws prohibit political speech or prohibit speech that has to do with legislation. But a time will come where right is right, wrong is wrong, and it's our thought leaders, speakers, and ministers who are responsible for bringing forward the truth about who we are in God and the sovereignty that God has over all of our lives.
And we really must consider how the church was formed that we know today, how the churches came to be in the history of knowing who Jesus is, not just was, but is, because he is still living, and knowing what he taught and how that teaching is now distorted and so challenged to, he had women who supported and led with him. He had women who taught. And then the church, as it was formed as a government entity of Rome, said women could not. And the feminine voice is so important. Mary's voice as mother is vital. Mary Magdalene's voice as cohort is vital. And those are voices that are coming out now. We've heard in the scriptures, it says that he will return in the twinkling of an eye. And I just say, when your eye twinkles, that spirit is there. Let's let it return. Let's not look out there, because the kingdom is within. Let's look within and get our eyes twinkling.
Yes, indeed. The mother voice is primal and primary. When we give of ourselves and carry a child and give birth to the child, and then teach and feed and nurture and train the child. I have 4 children, all of whom are grown. And my oldest and I we had a period of estrangement that was extremely painful, but now we talk for 2 hours every day.
Oh, that's wonderful. There's nothing more challenging than estrangement from a child.
Oh my God.
Nothing. Well, the death of a child, yes. But estrangement is the heart. It's a hole in the heart. And a lot of us have those experiences today.
Yes. And what I learned many, many years before, when he was a baby, I was in a class and somebody pointed out that as your boys grow up, you have to be enough of a person not to take it personally when they stray, not to take it personally when they rebuke you or they are disobedient, but to allow them the freedom to grow into their identity as young men and going forward. And I tried to practice that. I realized that when you're training or teaching your children through criticism or harsh judgment, you are breaking their psyche. And so allowing them the freedom to process what you shared with them. But all of that to say that my oldest and I talk, and he tells me how important it was to go to the church that we went to and what he learned in Sunday school. And one moment. And how decorum was such an important part of his learning experience so that he can go anywhere and feel at ease being exactly who he is. And when he said that to me, I felt as if my job, I did a job, and I'm seeing the fruit of it. And so our job right now is to plant seeds of justice in our society, seeds of independent thought, independent free speech, all of those freedoms that are contained in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights have to be preserved at all costs. Because ultimately, when we are critical thinkers and we apply what we've learned in society to our government, there's some things we just can't stand for. And so I believe it's time to plant the seeds of resistance, the seeds of freedom, and the seeds of self-love. And I guess most importantly, the seeds of collaboration between people. Because we can't go on and have the world that we aspire to, which is up here, when we descend into violence or exploitation. And if we teach our children that woman who's harvesting diamonds with her bare hands and her baby on her back deserves to have the same quality of housing and food and everything else that we do, then our children and our children's children will work hard to make sure that there is basic human rights, basic equality in what kinds of lives we're able to live.
You know, I was raised in fundamentalist Christianity. You could call it Christian nationalism. I was raised in that and had a John Birch Society mother and uncle and aunt. And critical thinking was not allowed. Questions were not welcomed. Children were in those cultures are not allowed to ask questions. You do what you're told. You mind your P's and Q's, and you are silent and not heard, and don't be seen. And the what that does in the child's mind is puts the child in a place of giving up asking questions. Well, most of them. I always pushed the limits, and I knew Jesus. I loved Jesus. I was all about him, but I also knew that the church was not allowing mothers to teach their children. And the kind of guidance that was given, and a lot of our schools today do not teach critical thinking. And this is the challenge. They teach to a test rather than how do you use your mind to come up with a solution.
Right.
Excuse me. And you know, this is when we look at our political structure right now. Well, they're talking about destroying the Department of Education. maybe there's an opportunity to restructure it in a way that will be better for our children. Maybe
I remember
there's hope in there.
There's hope. I remember I was writing a grant proposal, I guess about a year ago, and I came across a quote from 1970 in a speech given by Ronald Reagan, where he really found public education to be a diabolical force in America, and that we should, that he and his followers should not foster an educated proletariat. And I found that sentiment to be anti-American, frankly, because public education is a basic human right. And the United States of America, for the time that it was the preeminent force in the world, was able to achieve that status because it had educated, brilliant people who were leading in technology and science and in other aspects of learning. So I think critical thinking is the foundation of all progress. Learning, book learning, and emotional intelligence is the foundation of an enlightened society, and we should do everything possible to preserve those aspects of life.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is so crucial. To learn how to live as a human, how to be a human. Who are we as humans? We are emotional, mental, spiritual, soul beings. And when the child can learn about being in a human body when they're young, then they will grow in a healthy way. And then when they're grown, they'll lead in a healthy way.
Exactly right. That's right. I think it's crucial also to teach children to love and respect themselves, and then love one another as they love themselves, so that you put another person's well-being and their safety on par with your own, so that you will fight to protect someone from harm, so that you will not allow them to be harmed or exploited, so that our national consciousness does not allow us to be drawn into fear-based teaching. Well, those people over there, they're bad, and so we've got to do something about them. I remember being at the pulpit of a church that I used to serve at, and talking about the children from South and Central American immigrants who were being snatched from their mothers and put into concentration camps. And then it came out later on that those children were being adopted by American families and never returned to their natural parents. It's an atrocity. It's just unbelievable that our country would be involved in that. But the truth is that there are many atrocities committed against people of color or indigenous people, and we tend not to talk about it. We tend to give the ideals and talk about who we are supposed to be or who we pretend to be, rather than delving into the tough issues and demanding a correction in governmental behavior. We could talk all day long about what's wrong, but as we're at the precipice of an evolutionary leap, and so correcting ourselves as individuals to release fear, greed, lust, and violence, and competition. Competition has a healthy aspect, but when you're competing based on things that don't really matter, and you're judging and condemning people based on external characteristics, we have gotten on the wrong path, and we can do better. So,
well, and what we can see right now There has been corruption risen to the highest levels, and we can see it clearly. It's evident, and I know that the way energy works, it's a toroidal energy field.
Yes.
And everything rises to the top, and once it's at the top, it just automatically falls down the sides. And the more we can empower our own humanity and collect together, gather together, and act in harmony and unison, the quicker that will clear from our world. So that's why we're tending our roots, because we have to really bring that from our own core. They say there's only one way. Well, yeah, it's individual. We each have an individual way from our own inner heart to our outer world, and we have the same source. We're all sourced from the same divinity. There is no difference, except as it expresses through our human life. Then it's completely different and unique and beautiful for each one of us.
Right, that's the truth. Yeah. The toroidal field is a pivotal tool to move energy from the higher realms through our bodies. And as it moves through our bodies, it takes away the spiritual refuse. And the envy makes people do terrible things, and we don't really want to hold that within the self. And so we allow God to use that field to take it away and send it where it can't harm anybody. And then what it does is it brings the Christ energy from the higher realms into ourselves, so that we have an indwelling presence of the Christ Spirit.
Correct.
And as we move through life with the Christ Spirit helping people along the way, you touch one life and you change that person's life, or you allow them to change themselves by interacting with you. And then they touch one and they touch one. Before you know it, the entire world is transformed into a much better place. And it does work.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, well, this has just really been a treasure, Dr. Julie. Thank you so much.
Yes,
yeah. Indeed. Do you have any final words of wisdom about what in the world were you thinking maybe about that?
So this is controversial, but I am able to see things that happen in remote places and hear messages from God. I'm going to be absolutely transparent about that because I was born with it. And many times I am seeing scenes of destruction and scenes of murder and death and bombings and crying and blood. And there are many wars taking place on the planet that are not publicized by the media. And we are in the midst of a global genocide that is taking place in various places: Yemen, Palestine, other parts of the Middle East, the Congo, the Sudan, Papua New Guinea. And when we fail to address the military-industrial complex and other systems that foster that kind of destruction, then we become part of the problem. And so murder is always wrong. And when people try to put a religious or spiritual covenant that covers or conceals the wrongdoing, we are complicit in the murder of millions of people around the world, and we do not have to condone that. And so for our children and our children's children, it's so important to remember that we are meant to live and we're meant to prosper. And we don't have to prosper as a result of the theft of life and the theft of the future of the children who died. And I am speaking, of course, specifically of Palestine, understanding that the way this genocide is unfolding could happen anywhere else in the world. It could happen in the United States. And if it comes to a community near you, that means that you have not stood up for those children in Yemen or those children in Gaza. And now who do you expect to come and stand up for you? And so love one another right now, wherever they are. That's my statement.
Yeah, no matter who they are, love one another as I have loved you. That's yeah, because he loves us no matter what, no matter where, no matter why. And so we can love each other just that way.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Julie. It's been really a pleasure to have the pleasure in that we're talking about the important things, and in that we get to be together in time and space for that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So as we wind up our day 7 here, I want to encourage you again that we're offering this as a gift of service from the Global Grandmothers Council Network to every heart that views these. You can find all of the videos on our Facebook group page, on our Facebook page, Global Grandmothers Council Network, and on our YouTube, Global Grandmothers Council. And come to our website, globalgrandmotherscouncil.org. And if you do feel that you've received something of value in these, we do encourage you to give back in this reciprocity, this give and take, that we give our time and service, and we welcome your donations. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and all of your donations through our website go through Zephy, which even pays the Stripe fees. So we get 100% of your donation, not just a piece of it. And I also encourage you to see our Grandmothers magazine, and we'll put a link. I don't have the link here, but we have a Grandmothers magazine. Well, you can find it in the globalgrandmotherscouncil.org. Helena Baines, our Kintsugi woman, has created it. It'll be monthly, where we feature a grandmother every month. And in our live streams in 2025, we'll feature a grandmother every week. And we look forward to a new year coming and the holy days of winter that we're in now. Thank you for joining us today. Much love.